So far, the Tavistock-based company has gone under the radar as they've designed a battery that could power an electric car for 1,500 miles.
One man in Tavistock now says that he's made the breakthrough to make these places a thing of the past.
And then my Twitter feed explodes. Apparently, a new battery has been invented. No, not by one of those narrow-minded battery manufacturers. You know, those who put billions into battery research every year. This one was invented by a single father of 8 and a Royal Navy officer. This is going to be awesome. No, a real game changer. Let's read the first line of the article, shall we? Imagine the satisfaction of driving your environmentally friendly electric car for 1,500 miles without having to stop to recharge the battery. A distance more than 4 times as far as the best and most expensive model currently on the road. Wow, that's awesome. Without having to stop to recharge, you know, something that would happen if you, say, for instance, couldn't recharge the battery. But I'm way too cynical. I mean, look, it's right there in the title of the article that it can go 1,500 miles without needing to charge. So if they're talking about charging it in the title, it's got to be a rechargeable battery, right? Under the bonnet is a revolutionary new type of battery which, unlike those used in conventional electric cars, can power buses, huge lorries, and even aircraft. Actually, you can power all of those things with a battery. It's just not a very smart way of doing it. What's more, it's far simpler and cheaper to make these batteries than the batteries currently in use in millions of electric vehicles around the world, and unlike those, it can be easily recycled. Yeah, but can it actually be recharged? It might sound like science fiction, but it's not. Last Friday, the battery's inventor, British engineer and former Royal Navy officer Trevor Jackson signed a multi-million pound deal to start manufacturing the devices on a large scale in the UK. Wow, that's awesome. I had no idea they were going to start manufacturing them. And he's actually holding one of them, which kind of suggests that it exists. And that's actually one of the batteries that's going to power something for 1,500 miles. I wonder where they're going to get the money for the mass manufacture. Austin Electric, an engineering firm based in Essex, which now owns the rights to use the old Austin Motors company logo, will be putting thousands of them into electric vehicles next year, according to Austin's chief executive, Danny Corcoran. The new technology is a game changer. Great, I'm sure if I look them up, they're going to be a massive, multi-million-dollar mega corporation with factories and suppliers and tons of expertise and thousands of employees. You know, to put thousands of them on the road next year. Yep, there it is. Austin Electric Limited, Essex. Director, Mr. Stubbs. I'm sure he's going to be a big shot. Currently the director of 5 whole companies. What do we got? Blackheart Limited, where he's both the engineer and director. I guess he uses all that time he's not directing all these multi-million-dollar deals to be an engineer. But whatever. He's got about 200,000 in assets and about 200,000 in liabilities, making the company worth about £100. What's next? Austin Motor Company, where he's both the director and company director. Assets, 2,000. Liabilities, 12,000. Net assets, minus 10,000. Now, I know I might be a little behind the times here, but I think you might need just a little bit more than £2,000 to run a real motor company. But whatever. AIG Holdings Limited, total assets, £100. I'm beginning to think this director might struggle to give out multi-million-dollar deals. And finally, Austin Electric, a company that doesn't even have its own website. Seriously, you look up Austin Electric, you'll find loads of electric companies for places like Austin, Texas. It was founded about a month before this article came out, with no details really available. What did the article say again? Austin Electric, an engineering firm based in Essex, which now owns the right to use the old Austin Motor Company logo, will begin putting thousands of them into electric vehicles next year. Yeah, I'm going to push X to doubt on that one. Actually, I did a little more scratching around and I found this. The filing for Austin Electric. Currency, Great Britain, pounds. Total number of shares allocated. 2. Seriously, 2 shares with an aggregated nominal value of £2. You could buy 2 of these companies for what you would pay for a meal at McDonald's and still have change. But what did the Mail highlight? Oh, it's an engineering firm that owns the right to the Austin Motors Company logo. Rather than the entire company is worth less than the money that's fallen down the back of a couch. And in any event, what the hell is the old Austin Motors logo got to do with anything? I mean, sure as hell ain't Aston Martin or something. Turns out it's an old British car manufacturer, defunct now for almost 100 years, which, according to Wiki, the rights are now owned by some Chinese firm. 2 years ago, Jackson claims motor manufacturers lobbied the Foreign Office to bar him from prestigious conferences for European business and government at a British embassy in Paris, which was supposed to agree a blueprint for ensuring all new electric cars by 2040. The bid to exclude him failed. Now, with the signing of the new Austin deal, it seems he is finally on the road to success. Awesome! He's finally on the road to success. Well... Sure. The motor lobby wanted to keep this prestigious guy with his friends in Austin Electric, you know, the £2 company. No, really, they felt really threatened by him. And you just know the conspiracy nuts will be all over this, just like they were with the water-powered car.
A local inventor has discovered a way, hear this, to use water to run your car.
It's a major breakthrough that will no doubt make motorists happy. And as Ralph Robinson explains, the Pentagon is also showing lots of interest in this project.
Runs for hundreds of miles on a few drops of water.
Myers started working on this project 4 years ago. He's not a scientist. He isn't even a chemist.
In his garage. Good grief, the formula for this mad inventor, invent something that's going to revolutionize the world, hasn't changed for decades.
In fact, he never graduated from college. Myers was determined, he says, to design something to protect this country from oil embargo. The Pentagon flew a lieutenant colonel in last week to look at Myers' invention. There's talk of possibly using it in the Star Wars defense program and to run army tanks.
And how Big Oil were trying to suppress his idea. You know, because Big Oil is always threatened by all those perpetual motion machines out there.
It'll be at least 2 years before the fuel system goes into mass production. The day it happens will be one the fuel industry hates, but it'll put a smile on the face of those who've had to say at one time or another, fill her up.
One man in Tavistock now says that he's made the breakthrough to make these places a thing of the past.
And if you ever want to lose faith in mankind, just read the comments on Stan Myers' water car. He was a threat to oil companies. Rest in peace, Stan. He was taken out. Ask yourself why all forms of technology have gotten way better and amazing over the last 100 years. Yet we are still using the same gasoline engines for the last 100 years. No advancement at all. Well, firstly, that's not quite true. And secondly, the reason that we're still using gasoline is because there really isn't anything better. Well, that is, nothing better that we can safely use. It's basically top banana in energy density. Indeed, it's essentially what was used in the first stage of the Saturn V. In the late 1980s, Stanley Meyer invented a car that could go from coast to coast in the United States on 21 gallons of water. Spoiler alert, it couldn't. That's not actually an energy source. He was offered $1 billion from the automobile industry for his invention, but turned it down because he wanted this idea to go to the people. Shortly afterwards, he was poisoned to death and his invention has been hidden from us ever since. Yet our children are not learning about inventors such as Myers in school, nor are they being encouraged to develop alternative fuel sources. See what I mean about kind of losing faith in mankind. I'm willing to bet that the government had this man killed and took all of his research. That is what happens. Watch me get an IRS audit for posting this comment. Stanley Meyer refused billions for his patents in 1997. He was poisoned to death the next year. Back when the news covered real stories, government killed him, plain and simple. An iPad runs on far more technology advanced than a car that runs on water. How are you going to call this fake? Oh my God, these people are depressingly stupid. Anyway, let's get back to the aluminium battery. He also secured a £108,000 grant. Wow, you can buy a lot of Austin Electric companies for that. For future research from the Advanced Propulsion Center, a partner of the Department of Business Innovation and Skills. Cool, £108,000 to do research. Until you have an idea of how much research actually costs. You see, a significant slice of what money in research goes into is paying salaries. So £108,000 would pay for a single researcher for a couple of years, with maybe some modest amount for consumables. You're not going to do a lot of research with £108,000. That's just the way it goes. In 2001, he began to investigate the potential of a technology first developed in the 1960s. Scientists had discovered that by dipping aluminium into a chemical solution known as an electrolyte, they could trigger a reaction between the metal and air to produce electricity. At the time, the method was useless for commercial batteries because the electrolyte was extremely poisonous and caustic. No. But he continues. After years of experimentation at his workshop in a Cornish village in Callington, Jackson's eureka moment came when he developed a new formula for an electrolyte that was neither poisonous nor caustic. I've drunk it when demonstrating it to investors so I can attest to the fact that it's harmless, Jackson says. This is exceptionally depressingly stupid reporting. I mean, does the journalist here really think that the edibility of the electrolyte, the drinkability of the electrolyte, has ever been something that inhibited the use of a battery? Does this person realize that basically every single internal combustion engine car in the world has a battery to start its motor, which has, as its electrolyte, concentrated sulfuric acid? And really, he thinks that the drinkability of the electrolyte is what's been holding back the development of the aluminium battery. I've drunk it when demonstrating it to investors so I can attest to the fact that it's harmless, Jackson says. Aha. You wanted to drink the electrolytes in your battery. Really, this kind of reminds me of the weed killer incident.
I do not believe that glyphosate in Argentina is causing increases in cancer. You can drink a whole quart of it and it won't hurt you.
Yep, this is climate change denier Patrick Moore, famously claiming that a Monsanto weed killer was safe to drink. He's not a small-time climate change denier either. He actually got retweeted by President Donald Trump. Patrick Moore, co-founder of Greenpeace. The whole climate crisis is not only fake news, it's fake science. There is no climate crisis. There's weather and climate all around the world. Oh, man. In fact, carbon dioxide is the main building block of all life. Fox and Friends, wow. I mean, where to start? First of all, no, carbon dioxide is not the main building block of all life, unless you want to cast your net so widely that you could say nerve agents aren't toxic because phosphates are some of the principal building blocks of life. And in any event, whether it's a principal building block of life or not doesn't actually matter. Climate change only depends on the amount of energy the Earth receives from the sun versus the amount of energy it radiates out into space. And currently, the former is larger than the latter. So, inevitably, the system must heat up.
You want to drink some? We have some here.
I'd be happy to, actually.
Until this moment happened, which is pure gold.
But not really, but
Not really?
I know it wouldn't hurt me.
If you say so, I have some glyphosate.
No, I'm not stupid.
Ah, okay, so you...
No, but I know
so
that
it's dangerous,
I
right?
know
Really, there are precious few liquids that you can drink that won't make you very sick or kill you.
Tell the truth.
it's not dangerous to humans. No, it's not.
So you're ready to drink one glass of
No,
glyphosate?
I'm not an idiot. Interview me about golden rice. That's what I'm talking about.
That's a serious blown out the water there. You know, going from, no, it's perfectly safe to drink, till he realizes that they actually have some there for him to drink.
Okay, then it's finished. Then the interview is finished.
That's a good way to solve things.
Yeah. You're a complete jerk.
I mean, let me just remind you, most car batteries run on lead plates and sulfuric acid. And it's amazing how few people have ended up harming themselves by drinking the sulfuric acid. Jackson gave me a demonstration. He cut the top off a can of Coke, drained it, filled it with the electrolyte, and clipped the electrodes to it, powering a small propeller. The energy in this will keep the propeller spinning for a month, he said. You can see what this technology could do in a vehicle if you scale it up. Oh, sweet Lord. Tell me he had more than this. What? He's demonstrated the electrolytic cell. You know, the battery.
So that's going to release the charge from the...
It will. And there we are. There's the propeller running.
Something that you can do with a potato. And you were impressed by this. So how hard is it to invent a totally new battery? Well, you're going to need some aluminium, another metal, which is a different potential. So I'm going to just take copper, because I have it. And you're going to need to make 2 electrodes out of this sort of things. Okay, piece of copper, and we're going to need a piece of aluminium. And we're going to make our piece of aluminium into another electrode. There you go. So, how close are we to electricity at this point? We're going to need a voltmeter. So this is going to tell us how many volts we're generating between these 2 contacts. So I myself actually generate some voltage. Cool. And if I connect one electrode to the aluminium and the other to the copper, of course I get nothing between them. I get nothing between them if I touch the 2. What if I just put some regular tap water in there and stick both electrodes in? Boom! All of a sudden, almost 1 volt. And that's how difficult it was to generate the potential. Now, if you want to conduct current, if you want to get power out of this thing, you've got to move the electrons, lots of electrons, from one to the other. The potential here is essentially, the nearest analogy I can give you is it's like 2 lakes, 1 lake up, 1 lake down. This tells you the difference in height between the 2 lakes. If you want to get power out of it, you've got to move electrons from one electrode to the other. So that usually means you want the electrodes as close as possible, and you want there to be as least resistance between the 2 from the electrolyte as possible. And once an aluminium air fuel cell is spent, it can be recycled very cheaply. I'm going to have to push X to doubt on that one again, but we'll come to that one in a second. According to Jackson, it's going to be super cheap. No. To cut a long story short, he's invented a square wheel. And it made such awesome clickbait that the Daily Mail ran with it, with a gazillion of other BuzzFeed-like vultures following afterwards. In reality, it's an aluminium oxygen battery, a concept that's been around since the dawn of electrochemistry, something like 100 or more years. And let's make one thing abundantly clear. This is not a rechargeable battery. It's a one-off. You use it and it's dead. Then you need a new battery. I mean, like or loathe Tesla, the one thing that you can say about them is if you want to recharge the battery, you just plug it into the mains. You don't have to take the entire battery out and put in a new one, which really does just point to the dishonesty in the title of this article. 1,500 miles without needing to charge. Well, you can't charge the battery at all. You see, if you just look at the thermodynamics, aluminium is not a stupid way of storing energy. Cool, I hear you say. So if the idea is so old, older than plane flight, why don't we have aluminium batteries powering everything? Well, actually, that's quite an interesting question. You see, the way it works, going a long way back, aluminium metal was one of the rarest of metals because it was so hard to manufacture. Indeed, there are even stories of a Russian Tsar giving his son an aluminium rattle, which at the time cost more than its weight in gold. The reason for this is because it's a gargantuan pain in the arse to make. Aluminium may be one of the most abundant elements on Earth, but not much of it is actually available in a mineable form, an ore which you can simply get the metal out of. It's just like there's loads of gold in the oceans. It's just you can't get it out very easily like that. You need something like a gold mine. So once you've got the ore, it comes out in a form that's approximately alumina, aluminium oxide, or aluminium oxide with a little bit of water in it. Bauxite, as the mineralogists call it, and it's one of the hardest compounds out there. Indeed, if you get a nice crystal of aluminium oxide, guess what it's called? Sapphire. And it's also got an insanely high melting point. For reference, gold melts at about 1,000 degrees, which is actually a pretty hard temperature to get to without modern equipment. Platinum is even crazier. That melts at about 1,700 degrees. Amazing. And alumina doesn't melt till just over 2,000 degrees Celsius. So I've got bad news. If you want to get the aluminium out of that, you're going to have to melt it at some point. And what the hell are you going to melt it in? Even a platinum crucible would be a puddle of metal by the time your alumina melts. Well, you've got to find a way of lowering its melting point. As many of you know, I've done something similar on this channel with sodium-potassium alloy, which is a beautiful and deadly metal at room temperature. But how can that be, I hear you ask? Sodium is a nice solid at room temperature, and potassium is a nice solid at room temperature.
And some sodium. They've both got about the same density, and so the ratio of the volumes basically gives me the ratio in which I'm mixing them in, which is approximately 4 parts potassium to 1 part sodium. There you go, you see? Liquid. You push two solids together and you get liquid metal, no less.
So why, if you mix the two together, do you get a liquid? Well, the detailed description is kind of complicated and involves terms like entropy and the such like, but the basic concept is trivial. Atoms are basically balls that stick together, like these magnets. So if I say, for instance, have large balls, say for instance, potassium, they stack together nicely and make a big grid like this. And if I have small balls, say for instance, sodium, they're also going to stack together nicely. But if I mix these two together, especially in an awkward ratio, they're going to stack together poorly. in a disordered way, which at an atomic level kind of means like a liquid. So you can do this by adding something to the alumina and reduce its melting point from about 2000 degrees, which is insanely high, to 1000, which is still insanely high and difficult to achieve, but much more possible. Okay, great. You've now got your molten alumina. Now you've got to electrolyze it, which is basically putting electricity through it, and boom, you get aluminium at one electrode and oxygen at the other. But this process gobbles up the electricity. It takes about 5% of the electricity in the United States just to make those soda cans that can be discarded without a second thought. Now, in principle, there's a lot of energy in aluminium or aluminum, depending. Indeed, thermodynamically, it's exactly the same both ways. So just as you have to put an insane amount of electricity in just to get your aluminium, you can also get an insane amount of electricity out by reversing this. Now, obviously, you can't do this at 1000 degrees. You have to do it in an aqueous solution of some sort. So what this in practice means is aluminium is actually a very good potential energy source.
And this is one of the reasons why aluminium is such a pain in the ass, is it doesn't look like it, but it's actually got an oxide layer on there, which inhibits the electrons coming off. It also inhibits it oxidizing away, which is fantastic. One of the reasons aluminium is a stunningly reactive metal, and the only reason it doesn't sort of catch fire really in air is because of this oxide layer that prevents it. So you really want to get rid of that oxide layer if you want to use this as in a battery. So you've got to dissolve that off somehow. Now, one of the easiest ways to do that is you just use sodium hydroxide, which is basically drain cleaner. And let's make a nice concentrated solution of sodium hydroxide, because there's something that I want to show you here later. This will get incineratingly hot, by the way. Very exothermic reaction dissolving sodium hydroxide in water. And of course, it is now drain cleaner, which means, yeah, you don't stick your fingers in it. Anyway, if I now do exactly the same thing, right? So with water, it gives us about a volt. In sodium hydroxide, wow! And that's mostly because we're dissolving off the oxide layer. So if I now immediately come back to water, you see it maintains the same voltage because the aluminium surface is now clean. However, there is a problem with doing it this way, and I'll show you what that is. Okay, I think that's good enough. So you got the thermal camera here. That's what you're seeing on the thermal camera. It's not quite in focus. Let's see if we can sort that out. All right, beautiful. And as you can see, this thing is a lot more than 20 degrees. I can tell you that. So that's all the heat that's been generated. That, for comparison, is the regular tap water by the dissolution of the sodium hydroxide. That's toasty. That's warm to the touch. 60 degrees. Okay, I'm going to call it quits at about 30 degrees. Now at this point, you've got to realise why you get that nice, clean metal surface. Whilst it's true that sodium hydroxide is very good at cleaning off the surface of aluminium and exposing a nice, clean metal surface, it also has some other somewhat less desirable properties. So if I just drop that in there. So in many ways, this is more the true reactivity of aluminium with water. And it gets really, really quite excited. And that's actually hydrogen gas being given off there, which is fairly explosive in its own right. And you'll notice that there's all sorts of weird precipitate now in the solution somewhere. So it's about 30 degrees in there at the moment, until I chuck my nice little piece of aluminium in there. And at first not a lot happens. Not a lot happens. A little bit of fizzing. A little bit of fizzing. And this is basically it releasing all of that energy. Remember I said there's a huge amount of energy in aluminium. Well, that's it. What are we up to? 50? 60? More than 60. Alright, and this is just a little bit of aluminium foil, 70. And that's incredible that you're generating that much heat whilst just stuck in a glass at 40 degrees. 80. It's hot enough to burn you. 90. That's boiling the water at this point. That's actually to the point where it's just boiling the water. Let's take a look what it looks like with the camera. And that's hydrogen being given off there. So if you like, oh, caustic. So that is why aluminium is a pain in the ass to use as a energy source. And you see the solution has now gone all cloudy. And that's just after a few little pieces of aluminium have been dissolved in it.
Trevor Jackson has developed a way to release energy from everyday aluminium. Scientists can already do it with totally pure aluminium, but using the metal in a drinks can is new.
Sorry, what was that? What was that, Miss BBC excellent science reporter? Being able to do it with a drinks can is completely new. Well, let's see how completely new it actually is. So, I've got my cut-off beer can, and bizarrely enough, there is no voltage. But let's just put in some water, shall we? And alakazam, boom! We have some potential. And let's clear off a little bit of that hydroxide, sorry, that surface layer, by adding just a little bit of our concentrated hydroxide. Boom. And look at the voltage go up. No one's ever done this before. Wow, look, a nice clean metal surface, and I'm generating all that potential from a beer can. No one's ever done this before. And look, if I short it out on the bottom, oh, that's bizarre, can't short it out. It's not cleaned the surface off enough. There we go, if I short it out, it goes to 0. But yeah, if I don't, 1.4 volts, it keeps on going up. Yeah, Miss Science Reporter at the BBC. Open a bloody textbook.
So this is your basic problem with the aluminium batteries. You need a material to clean off the oxide layer. Now in this instance I used concentrated sodium hydroxide, which is actually quite extreme in its reaction with the aluminium. However, even if I had just cleaned off the oxide layer, the water will quite happily react with the aluminium, which in practice means that an aluminium air battery will lose some 80% of its charge over the period of about a month, whereas with the regular lithium ion battery, it would lose about 5%. Further, once the aluminium has reacted with the water, it gives aluminium hydroxide, which further inhibits the efficiency of the battery because you've now got white sludge between your electrodes.
The electrolyte breaks the metal down, releasing energy. What's in the fluid is top secret intellectual property known only by Trevor and his lawyers.
Or anyone who's opened a chemistry textbook or understands basic chemistry. It's aluminium hydroxide. Then, of course, you've got the volume change problem. With most batteries, it's sort of understood that the volume of the battery doesn't change between the charged and the discharged state. Not really so with aluminium oxygen batteries. You know, the basic reaction is you start with aluminium and some water and you convert it with some oxygen into aluminium hydroxide. And a few back of the envelope calculations show that this will about double the volume of the battery. In easy to understand ball terms, you start off with the aluminium, those are the small balls, and then you're discharging it by adding oxygen to it. So you add those two together, you're going to end up with a bigger volume battery at the end than you had at the beginning. And then finally, the recharging. You take, for instance, a Tesla. And I'm going to love the people in the comments saying that I'm shilling for Tesla here. You plug your Tesla battery into the mains and it'll recharge your battery. It's fairly quick and fairly easy. And it takes pretty much a minimal amount of extra energy. With your aluminium battery, you've got to take all that white sludge from your discharged battery, the aluminium hydroxide, then you've got to dry it into aluminium oxide, then you've got to melt it at 1,000 degrees, then you've got to put all of the electricity into it, to make the aluminium. That's effectively charging the battery. That's going to take at least a bare minimum of the same amount of electricity that you had to put in to your Tesla battery. Then you've got to take your aluminium out and then somehow shape it into your new batteries, and voila, very simple, a recharged aluminium battery. And using recycled aluminium doesn't help you at all here, because fundamentally, if you want to recharge the battery, you've got to put that bare amount of electricity into the battery. So that's a quick summary of these amazing, never thought of before aluminium batteries. And maybe, just maybe, Austin 2-pound electric really does have some proprietary top secret formula that somehow fundamentally changes the properties of aluminium. And maybe, just maybe, Stanley Meyer really did have a car that needed nothing more than water to run on.
Thanks.
Yeah. You're a complete jerk.
And maybe, just maybe, if you plug a power cord into itself, you will get unlimited power. But I doubt it. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the notification bell to make sure you don't miss out on new uploads. And as ever, you can support this channel either by visiting my Amazon store below, where you'll find loads of awesome science goodies like multimeters and some cute cubic lattice arrays of magnets and the such like. Or you can support this channel directly through Patreon. And thanks for watching.